Massacre.
Me, thanks very much. The question was, so what's the do you think that the reference on civil liberties are increasingly driven not by anxiety to protect our security, but a desire to protect rational? It seems to be ID cards are driven less by security, more by rational and the NHS. We've seen regulation of the Investigatory Powers Act, powers used to catchment areas. We've seen bins and recycling rationing, rationing is driving a lot of
I think that this is a fundamental problem you have when you rely on the state to be your provider for essentials rather than the market. Because as long as the state provides things, it will do it inefficiently. In a very memorable phrase, Rupert Darwin, former colleague of mine, HQ, termed the National Health Service the National Triage Service. That's what it really does. You go in, a decision is made about whether or not you're likely to do well. You can't buy a health service, you just get shunted across to the death wing. And that's why specifically old people are treated very badly under the NHS. That's actually nothing to do with the point about civil liberties, but it is to do with the point about rationing. As far as civil liberties is concerned, it's very plain to everyone that speed cameras don't exist to try and drive down speed, they exist to drive up revenue. That's plainly the main incentive of councils when they put these things into place. Now, you don't have a civil liberty to drive and pose dangers to other people, but you do have a civil liberty to drive as long as you're driving safely. But they've got no interest in whether you're driving safely or not. They wish simply to garner more revenue. And the argument, well, I'm only 3 miles over the limits, on a wide road, middle of the day, no traffic, will cut no ice, because they're not actually interested in the safety or otherwise of what you've done. So my answer, I'm afraid, is that's the state we live in. But we're making that more and more common by these incredible civilities because we allow it to happen. People don't protest when that camera goes up at the end of their street. And until that's a regular occurrence, until people regularly say, I object, not in general, I might be irritated by it, but I object to that box which is looking down my street or in my house. Until people do that, and MPs have the same drive to take that into account, in the way at the moment MPs do get lobbied to put in more CCTV in specific areas, until there's a counterbalance, that's going to carry on. Because yes, we live in an environment in which we are rationed, and MPs operate in that environment.
Can you answer about one thing, Alex, on this? It baffles me, I don't know if people in the audience agree on this, but it is, I think, commonly agreed now that in this country you really can't get that worked up. You don't get that many people that worked up about the whole CCTV thing. Compared to, say, America, I noticed that a lot of people I speak to in Britain, as I myself have, there's a sort of reflect not particular fear of the CCTV culture. I think it's wasteful. I think it doesn't work a lot.
Yeah.
So, but there is something about in this country that you can't get with that work. They have a camera at the end of their street, but they're not going to go and protest about that. Instead, the ID cards thing. Quickly on that. I mean, this is a very interesting example of how you slip on these things. I agree with something Alex said, that we often overreact after terrorist attacks. I myself often argue that there should be a moratorium on any legislation for at least 6 months after any major terrorist attack. I mean, it's usually you find that it's already illegal to fly planes into tower blocks. You don't need massive amounts of more legislation in this case. But there should always be caution about introducing legislation too swiftly. And indeed, I've always argued there should be sunset clauses on legislation because it is very restrictive if that were to come about. But ID cards are great examples of government's incompetence because, of course, as anyone who's looked into it knows, they will do nothing to stop terrorism. They will, as far as I can see, do absolutely nothing to improve the government's knowledge of how many people or who is in this country. This seems to be something we've lost sight of a long time ago.
In response to your question to me, Douglas, my view on CCTV is that people don't protest in general until they see, for example, a recent trial of a young woman whose privacy was invaded by a series of CCTV operators who recorded her intimate moments in her flat. I'm sure that she felt her time and privacy and life was invaded, and furthermore, when it was repeated at the trial of those people. So some people do get prosecuted.
Sure. But the general witting up of in the error, I mean, what would it require? A lot of those cases? Or?
Well, it would require more demonstration that it happens, or more discovery that it happens. Most people firmly convinced that I talk to in this field that it's going on. One of the great difficulties is convincing the victim to give evidence, to go to court and say, yes, that's me, that's my house, that's my body you can see on that screen. And you can understand that. The gentleman on the road.
Yeah, thank you very much. Jonathan Bullock, I'm a councillor and cabinet member of Kettering in Northamptonshire, and very much a freedom association supporter and civil libertarian. But I must say, on CCTV, we had a big problem years ago in Kettering town centre, of youths causing problems, stopping other law-abiding youths going out to the pub and having a drink. We've got gangs coming in from other towns to cause trouble. We've got CCTV now. I spent the night with the CCTV guys watching what was going on, and it meant that the police could be away from the scenes. It didn't look like a police state, of policemen all over the town centre. The police could be away, and 2 or 3 times in the night we saw some gangs started trying to pick fights with people. It meant the police could move in quickly, sort out the trouble, and let the law-abiding citizen get on with having a nice quiet drink in the town centre. They actually were. You mentioned examples which are probably abuse of CCTV, which quite rightly, as Douglas said on those other issues, should be punished.
Sorry.
Yep.
You go.
Yeah, I was just saying one other issue I was just going to mention is DNA. There was this example, I think it was a while back, where someone who was unfortunately a rapist and child killer got caught because his DNA was on the register, even though it had been taken when he was innocent of something or not proven guilty. And under a lot of libertarian suggestions, his details should have been erased, and of course he wouldn't have been caught. And I can't see the problem with a DNA base. I really don't have a problem with that. I can't see how the government can abuse it like they could an ID card, where they start using it for all sorts of other different reasons. So those are 2 points I was going to make.
Taking those briefly in turn, there is a point about disbursement of CCTV, that you move the problem from A to B by the presence of a camera, rather than dealing with the problem itself, that the troublemakers move on from the area that's covered by the camera. And unless you want cameras to watch everywhere, which I hope we don't, then that disbursement problem will continue to exist. But moreover, you both, I suppose, asked a question about when will people object to CCTV? What's the trouble? And that's right. If you poll people generally, do you approve of solving crime on CCTV? People say yes. Do you approve of the permanent retention of innocent people on a government database? No. So it all depends on the question that you're asking. As far as the DNA database question is concerned, actually there are plenty of uses beyond government solving crimes that can be used by a database, not least by insurance companies, who display enormous interest in knowing about your background and the state of your health, which your DNA will be enormously helpful as a starting point. But the bigger question, actually, is whether the state has the right to that information and material about you in the first place. And here's something that may be unpopular even with an audience like this. I firmly accept that one of the consequences of my position is that some crimes will go undetected and that some crimes will go unpunished. And we have to decide what kind of country we live in. We could solve all crimes if every other person was a policeman and everything in our life was governed by the state. Now, you may think that's an absurd level. That's right. That's the extreme on the one hand. And we could solve no crimes on the other hand, because we could have no policemen and no state. But we have to decide where we want to live in the middle. And you poll people, do you want everyone in Britain today to be on a DNA database? There's a healthy proportion, 40 to 50%, say yes. Everyone should be on a DNA database. Poll them and ask, do you think that babies should have their DNA put in the database? Oh no. 98% say no. Well, you see the point. People aren't actually, I don't think, rationally addressing the question of privacy that you're now raising.